ever wish your day wasn't dictated by your health? Are you tired of being tired all the time, or is pain holding you back from enjoying your time with your family? Would you like to manage your symptoms holistically, but you just don't know where to begin? I am so excited that you're here. This podcast will help you understand how natural remedies work so you can relieve your symptoms and live a fuller life. My name is Penny. I'm an occupational therapist, past pharmaceutical rep, a mom, and a wife with a strong faith, and for 25 years, I battled through debilitating Crohn's disease. I took all the medicine and did all the surgeries that stole so much time with my family, but never truly healed me. I finally realized if I was going to survive this disease, I needed to open my stubborn eyes to alternative solutions. I researched how perfectly our bodies work with plants and a lifestyle that made my health less of a burden to my family and aligned so beautifully with my faith and my medical training. If you're ready to reclaim your life with holistic options that are easy to implement as a busy mom and provide relief that lasts, this is the podcast for you. Have you ever taken your shoes off and stood barefoot in the grass and noticed that it just feels so good in a quiet, calming kind of way? There's actually a scientific question hiding inside that simple experience. Welcome back to Becoming Natural Podcast. This is Penny, your host, and this is episode 71, Earthing, the Promising Benefits Found in Grounding Yourself. Depending upon where you've heard about grounding, sometimes called earthing, you've probably encountered two very different messages. One says grounding is a miracle that can fix nearly everything, and the other says the entire idea is absolute nonsense. As usual, the truth is probably somewhere right in the middle. So today I want to slow down and explore grounding very carefully, with curiosity and with real science where it exists. Grounding, also called earthing, the promising benefits found in grounding yourself. We're going to talk about what grounding actually is, what physics tells us about it, how modern life has changed our electrical relationship with the earth, what research has explored so far, and a simple multimeter experiment that I ran myself that made this topic a lot more interesting to me. Because when you strip away the hype and the marketing language, grounding becomes a fascinating story about how the human body interacts with the natural world that God created. At its very simplest level, grounding simply means direct physical contact between your body and the earth. So that contact might look like walking barefoot on the grass, standing in sand at the beach, gardening with your bare hands, or sitting or lying on the ground, or even just using a grounding mat that connects to earth through a grounding outlet in your electrical system in your house. Nothing mystical, just your body touching the earth. But grounding becomes interesting when you realize something most people never think about. The earth carries a vast supply of free electrons, and the human body is also electrical. Electrons are negatively charged particles. Think about it. When two objects with different electrical potentials come into contact, electrons move between them until the charge equalizes between the objects. And that's just basic science. It's the same reason lightning discharges into the ground. It's why buildings are connected to grounding rods. The earth acts as an almost infinite electrical reservoir. So when your body touches the earth, your body's electrical potential equalizes with the earth. That's the fundamental idea behind grounding. That's all there is. So, at this point, you might be wondering, if grounding involves electrons moving between our body and the earth, where do those electrons actually come from? This answer could lead into an entire podcast about the miraculous design of the earth, because it turns out it involves something happening in our atmosphere every single day. Lightning. Across the planet, there are roughly 40 to 50 lightning strikes every single second. And every one of those strikes transfers electrical energy between the atmosphere and the earth. Scientists call this system the global electrical circuit. Isn't that so cool? I had no idea about this. You can think of it like the earth and the atmosphere forming a giant electrical system. The upper atmosphere carries the positive charge. The surface of the earth carries the negative charge. Lightning and atmospheric electricity constantly move charges between those two layers, maintaining that electrical balance. Because of this process, the Earth's surface maintains a stable supply of mobile electrons. So when grounding researchers talk about the Earth being a reservoir of electrons, they're actually referring to this global electrical system that's been studied for over a century. So, what's fascinating is that when your body touches the earth, the electrical potential between your body and the earth equalizes because of this massive electrical system and this huge solar system that deals with our atmosphere. Your body essentially becomes a part of that electrical environment. Our tiny little body on the tiny planet Earth is so amazing. Again, that doesn't automatically mean grounding cures disease or dramatically changes physiology, but it does explain why electrical measurements show that the body's voltage relative to the Earth drop dramatically when contact is made. We often think about our body primarily in terms of chemistry, like our hormones or our vitamins or inflammation. All of those things matter. But underneath that chemical layer is yet another reality, another layer. Our body is also very electrical. Your brain communicates through electrical signals. Your heart rhythm depends on electrical impulses. Muscles contract through electrical activity. Every single cell maintains a tiny electric voltage across its membrane. So when we talk about grounding, we're talking about the body interacting with the electrical environment around it. It's not woo-woo. It is totally scientific. Modern life has changed our electrical environment significantly. For most of human history, people were almost always in contact with the earth. People walked barefoot, they slept on natural materials, they worked outdoors more, animals lay directly on the soil, but modern life changed that. Today, we're insulated from the earth by materials like rubber-soled shoes or synthetic flooring. Our beds are elevated off the ground. We have plastic materials between us and the ground. The materials block electrical contact with the earth. At the same time, we live surrounded by electrical wiring. Alternating current flowing through wiring produces electric fields around us, and those electric fields can induce a measurable voltage on the human body. And one of the biggest everyday reasons that we stay insulated is very simple: our shoes. This is another small detail that quietly changed our relationship with the earth, completely slow and unbeknownst to us. But modern shoes are usually made with rubber soles, and rubber is an excellent electrical insulator, meaning it prevents us from connecting if it's an insulator. And that's one reason that electricians often wear rubber-soled shoes. That rubber prevents electrical current from easily traveling through the body to the ground. It protects them. So when we walk around wearing thick rubber soles, we're essentially insulating ourselves from the earth beneath us. Historically, though, shoes were very different. They were made from materials out of hides, leather, which is electrically conductive and much better than rubber. And for much of human history, people even walked barefoot. Footwear varied across cultures: soft leather moccasins or thin woven sandals, simple leather sandals. I can think of huaraches or moccasins with Native Americans, or sandals, talk about Jesus wore sandals. Natural materials made our shoes that kept the foot much closer to the ground than the modern rubber-soled footwear. So modern footwear has quietly created something that didn't exist for most of human history: a nearly constant layer of electrical insulation between our bodies and the ground that we walk on. So we have this human antenna effect around us. So inside buildings, the human body can behave like a small antenna. Electrical wiring and walls produces those electric fields I mentioned. Those fields can induce voltage on our body, directly impacting our body. So when researchers measure body voltage relative to the earth ground, many people inside homes measure anywhere from 100 to 2,000 millivolts. Standing near appliances often increases the reading unless, of course, they're grounded. But lamps, refrigerators, extension cords, dimmer switches, your body picks up these electrical fields. But when the body connects to the earth, that induced voltage can collapse dramatically. And that's something you can measure yourself with a simple multimeter. So that's what I did. I had to prove it to myself. I bought a very inexpensive multimeter, which I will link up if you would like to do this yourself. And I ran a little experiment. And I will first say that before I measured my body voltage, I just walked around to my lamp, my big extension cord behind my television that has all the Wi-Fi and all the connections for my TV. And I'm telling you what, it would drastically increase when I got close to it. And then I walked away and it would go down. And it's so crazy to think that we can't necessarily feel that, but it is there and it is happening. And I didn't believe it, to be honest. So then I measured my body voltage relative to the earth ground in several conditions. First, I was standing inside the house with rubber-soled shoes on the hardwood floor, and I measured 540 millivolts. Then I was standing inside on the hardwood floor barefoot, and that was 430 millivolts. And then I was standing barefoot on my grounding mat, which was 9 millivolts. So I went all the way from 540 in my rubber-soled shoes to 9 on my grounding mat inside. So I went outside and I stood on the concrete, and it had been raining, so the concrete was wet, and water is actually a really good conductor of electricity. So on the concrete, I was 7.6 millivolts. And as soon as I stepped over barefoot on the grass, I went boop, right down to 0. And I recognize that millivolts are small if you're scientific, but the point is it's measurable. And when you start adding up all the millivolts of electricity around us, if it's your phone that's charging next to your head, if it's your bedside table lamp, if it's all your cords underneath your bed, everything adds up for some sort of a voltage. And I definitely had different voltages. And the worst one was my phone charging. What fascinated me was how dramatically that voltage dropped when my body connected to the earth. And yes, even that concrete was conductive. Inside the house, the body carried that measurable voltage, but when it was grounded, pop, dramatically, it went down to 0 so fast. And what makes grounding even more interesting is that researchers have begun asking a deeper question. If electrical changes can be measured when the body contacts the earth, could that connection influence biological processes inside the body as well? I don't know. A small but growing group of studies has explored several areas where grounding might have measurable effects, particularly inflammation, blood flow, and sleep regulation. The research is still early, but the findings have been intriguing enough to keep scientists asking more questions. And this is where grounding research becomes really, really interesting. Inflammation, which we talk about all the time, we don't want it in excess. It involves immune cells producing molecules called reactive oxygen species. You never have to know that again. But these molecules are highly reactive and they can damage your tissue if they accumulate excessively. Electrons can actually neutralize those reactive molecules by stabilizing their electrical charge, i.e., bringing them down to 0, right? The positive and the negative go across. So some researchers have proposed what's called the electron hypothesis. This idea suggests that electrons from the Earth may enter the body during grounding and help neutralize reactive molecules involved in inflammation. It kind of makes sense. This theory is still being studied, but it provides a possible explanation for observations in early grounding research. So first, which I thought was most fascinating, is the blood flow. One pilot study examined red blood cells under a microscope before and after grounding. Red blood cells carry a slight negative surface charge, but this charge helps them to repel each other so they don't clump together, so they don't clot. In the study, the red blood cells appeared less aggregated after grounding. So if the blood cells repel each other more effectively, blood may flow more easily through tiny vessels in our body, which is amazing when you think about people who have clotting issues. This research is small, but it's still fascinating nonetheless. Researchers have also explored grounding and cortisol rhythms. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone. We've talked about it a lot. It's also very trendy to talk about right now. But normal cortisol rises in the morning and it gradually declines through the evening. And when people live under chronic stress, this rhythm often becomes disrupted. Some small grounding studies observed improvements in nighttime cortisol patterns, suggesting the body returned to a more natural daily rhythm. better cortisol rhythm, supports better sleep. Again, early research, but intriguing. So, how has our modern sleeping habits changed our contact with the earth? Everybody, it seems, has sleep issues. So, there's a small detail about grounding that most of us never think about, and it has to do with how we do our sleeping. For most of human history, people slept much closer to the ground on animal skins, on woven mats, grass mats, or even simple natural fibers. Even later in history, sleeping surfaces were still closer to the ground and made from natural materials like wood and cotton, wool, or linen. And these materials, while they're not perfect conductors, they are far less insulating than many of our modern materials in our synthetic mattresses. Compare that to how many of us sleep today, right? Modern beds are made of, first of all, we're elevated several feet off the ground, if not on a second story or third story, surrounded by synthetic flooring, built with foam, plastics, synthetic fabrics. Many of these materials are electrical insulators. That means they reduce the electrical interaction between the body and the earth. Again, it doesn't automatically mean that grounding dramatically changes our health, but it does highlight yet one more way that it sounds very interesting, the way our bodies have changed through years. Sleep is when the body performs many of its repair processes: inflammation regulation, tissue repair, hormone balancing, immune activity. So it just simply raises a question. With all of us seemingly incredibly sick these days, with so many more issues, did the electrical environment of the earth play any subtle role in the body's nighttime recovery processes? Research exploring grounding have begun asking that question. Are we giving ourselves the opportunity to recharge while we're sleeping that we should? Some early studies examined grounding sleep environments have observed changes in cortisol rhythms and sleep quality. Research is needed, of course, more before drawing strong conclusions, but still it's a fascinating way to consider how dramatically our relationship with the earth has changed just in the past century. And what if, in the same way that we charge our phones at night to get the battery back to 100%, we should be recharging our bodies by sleeping grounded? I've also read that sleeping on the ground can be better for the spine. The body shapes to the earth instead of the bed shaping to the body, but I'll admit sleeping on the ground is not my idea of a great night's sleep because I have become accustomed to a nice, comfortable bed. Sometimes our modern life quietly separates us from the things our bodies once experienced every single day, like sunlight or natural movement, fresh air, contact with the earth itself. There are so many little things that we have slowly stepped away from. So grounding may or may not prove to be a powerful physiological tool, but it certainly reminds us of something important. The human body was designed to live in connection with the natural world. One other observation I made when I was doing some research, it makes the whole topic, of course, very interesting to me, is that animals are always in contact with the earth. Dogs lie on the ground, cows rest on the soil, wild animals sleep directly on earth, grass, or vegetation. They don't wear insulating shoes, they don't spend their lives walking on synthetic flooring, and their bodies remain electrically connected to the natural environment almost all of the time. Humans, on the other hand, we now spend much of our life completely insulated from the earth in our souls, on our carpets that are synthetic, in our elevated beds, our plastic materials, and in a relatively short period of history, we moved from living in constant contact with the earth to living almost completely separated from it. So, it still raises more questions. If the human body developed for thousands of years in constant contact with the earth, could that connection have played a small role in how our bodies regulate themselves? So, one more fun thing that I'm sure everybody's going to love, but one thing I found very fascinating when I was reading is the human foot. So what really caught my attention is the design of our foot. I know most people hate feet, but don't hate feet. They're actually genius. The soles contain thousands of nerve endings. These receptors allow your brain to detect pressure, vibration, texture, balance. Your feet are constantly sending sensory information to your brain about the environment beneath you. The soles of your feet also contain high-density eccrine sweat glands. That's ECCRINE. And the sweat glands do more than just cool the body. Sweat glands actually contain water and electrolytes, and what a surprise, electrolytes increase electrical conductivity. So slightly moist skin conducts electricity better than dry skin. So when bare feet touch the earth, the combination of the skin, the nerve density, and moisture may actually allow efficient electrical contact. And interestingly enough, the areas of the foot that most often contact the ground, which is the heel, the ball of the foot, and the pads of the toes, think heel toe, they also contain some of the highest concentrations of eccrine sweat glands in the entire body. I don't think that was by accident. This is the part that made me sit back in my chair for the first time, and I really thought about the foot. But think about the design of the human foot. Thousands of nerve endings, specialized receptors that detect that texture, that detect the vibration and the pressure and our temperature, a high concentration of sweat glands that make the skin conductive, and all of that sits on the bottom of our body, the part that was designed to touch the ground, the part that we often treat as dirty, not living protected under the skull like our amazing computer system called the brain, but on the bottom of our foot that touches the dirty ground. How powerful and sensitive the foot is, it's not protected at all from the environment. It's on the weight-bearing part of the body that we often neglect. The very part designed to meet the earth also happens to be neurologically rich and electrically conductive. Grounding tends to work best on moist soil or grass because water and minerals improve that conductivity, which is why many people notice it most when walking barefoot on dew-covered grass. Now, we have to be careful, because I'm getting so excited, not to jump beyond what the science actually shows us. But it does make you wonder, was the human body designed to have more interaction with the earth than modern life allows? For most of human history, we walked barefoot, we slept closer to the ground, we worked in the dirt, we were working with our hands. And today, many of us wake up, put on our rubber-soled shoes, walk across synthetic flooring, sit in chairs, sleep elevated off the ground, rarely touch the earth directly, have LED lights or fluorescent lights on our head all day, sometimes for days or weeks. If you actually sit back and think about it, we could go actual weeks without ever coming in contact with the ground. You got to think about that one. And maybe that separation matters more than we realized with how we actually feel. Genesis tells us that humanity was formed from the dust of the ground. That's a poetic image, but it's also, interestingly, physical. The same earth we were formed from interacts with our bodies in measurable ways. Whether grounding turns out to be a profound physiological tool or simply a reminder to spend more time outside, one thing is very clear. The human body was never designed to live completely separated from the natural world. Sometimes the path back to balance isn't complicated or even costly. Sometimes it's as simple as stepping outside, taking off your shoes, and letting your feet touch the earth again. Can we all agree how good it feels to walk barefoot in the grass or along a sandy beach, or to lie on the ground and look at the sky? Maybe there's more to taking the time to relax on the ground than just taking a break. So let's talk about the myth versus the science real quick. Grounding does measurably change the body voltage relative to Earth. That's basic physics. There's early research suggesting grounding may influence inflammation and sleep and nervous system balance. Grounding should not be presented as the cure-all. What grounding definitely encourages is something we already know is beneficial: spending time outdoors in contact with nature. And if someone listening today is completely unconvinced by any of the grounding research, there are still very real reasons why stepping outside barefoot can feel surprisingly good for the body. These reasons don't require controversial theories. They're simply rooted in how the body works. So let's just point out 3 of them. Your nervous system responds to nature. The first reason grounding often feels calming has nothing to do with electrons. It has to do with your nervous system. Your brain is constantly scanning your environment for signals of safety or danger. Bright lights or loud noises, screens, traffic, and constant stimulation tend to activate our sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight side of your nervous system. Nature tends to do the opposite. Natural environments tend to be quieter. Visual patterns in nature are softer and more rhythmic. There's research showing that time spent outdoors can lower stress hormones and calm the nervous system. So when someone steps outside barefoot and stands in the grass for a few minutes, their nervous system often shifts towards the parasympathetic activity, which is the rest and restore state. And sometimes what feels like grounding energy is simply the nervous system finally exhaling. The second one, the feet are one of the most sensory-rich areas of the body, as we've discussed. Your feet contain thousands of nerve endings, and when you wear your shoes all day long, especially those thick rubber soles or really tight shoes, much of that sensory input is muted. But when you're bare feet, get out of your shoes. First thing I do when I get home is take off my shoes or get them to touch the grass or the soil or the sand or stone. Those nerve endings suddenly come alive. Your brain receives a flood of information about the surface beneath you. Even when you take off your socks, you're way more sensitive to what is beneath your foot. That sensory stimulation helps regulate the nervous system. In neuroscience, that is sometimes called sensory grounding. Obvious reasons, but using physical sensation to bring the nervous system back into balance. So even without any electrical explanation, walking barefoot activates a powerful network of sensory feedback that can calm the body. And finally, number 3, it brings us back into contact with the world that we were designed for. So for all of our history that we spent our days outdoors, walking on natural surfaces, working in the soil, all the things that we did outside and not captivated, caged inside, the human body developed in constant contact with the natural environment. So many things that we may not even know about were developing based on our environment. But modern life changed that dramatically. Many of us now spend most of our days inside those buildings, wearing our shoes, walking on floors that are 15, 20 stories above the ground, looking at our screens, surrounded by electrical fields. So sometimes when we step outside and feel the grass under our feet, something in the body recognizes that that environment is familiar, it's natural, and it's home. And maybe part of what we call grounding is simply returning to the environment the human body was created to live in. So even if someone remains skeptical about the electrical theory of grounding, there's still a lot of wisdom in the simple habit of spending time outside, feeling the ground beneath your feet, slowing down long enough for your nervous system to catch up with your body. Sometimes the simplest habits carry more power than we actually realize. So if you spent any time at all looking into grounding, hearing about grounding, you've probably come across the book called Earthing, the most important health discovery ever. It was written by Clinton Ober along with Stephen Sinatra and Martin Zucker. And it's one of the books that helped bring the modern grounding conversation actually into the public eye because so many people did not want to put money into researching grounding. I can't imagine why, since it's free. But Clint Ober wasn't originally a health researcher. He spent much of his career working in the cable television industry, where grounding electrical systems is extremely important for signal stability. At one point, he began asking the question, if grounding stabilizes electrical systems in buildings and equipment, what happens when the human body reconnects electrically with the earth by grounding? That question led him down a long path of experimentation and observation. The book shares stories of people who began spending more time grounded, walking barefoot, sleeping on the grounded sheets, or sitting outdoors with direct contact with the earth. And by the way, I'll link up that book in the show notes. It was amazing. It was a page turner. I could not put it down. I had as much fun reading about grounding as when I first learned about essential oils. Like, it is that exciting, actually. Some people reported improvements in their sleep, some people in their chronic pain, inflammation, and recovery quickly from their physical activity. So, to be clear, they're testimonials. They're not the same as controlled scientific studies, but I am just fine with people who observe changes. And when it is that consistent with that many people who say that they have benefits, what can it hurt? Some testimonials spark scientific curiosity and they make researchers ask, why would people have similar experiences across the board? Is there something measurable actually happening? And that curiosity is part of what led researchers to measure body voltage, cortisol rhythms, blood flow, and nervous system changes during grounding. So while the book itself is not obviously a clinical trial, it helped open the door to a fascinating conversation about how the body interacts with the electrical environment of the earth and pointing out that we are actually electrical beings. Some scientists are skeptical, and that's actually a healthy part of our scientific process because we should ask questions. Many grounding studies are small pilot studies. Some have been funded by researchers who are personally interested, and that obviously raises caution flags. But researchers prefer things like large randomized trials, independent funding, replication by multiple research groups, and grounding research simply hasn't reached that level just yet. Scientific skepticism doesn't necessarily mean it's false. In fact, it often means that evidence is still developing. If you think about it, many ideas in medicine began as small observations that seemed unusual at first. The connection between bacteria and stomach ulcers was dismissed for years before it became widely accepted. The role of the microbiome in the human health once was barely acknowledged, and now that's all we talk about. Even the understanding of how sunlight affects vitamin D and immune health took decades to fully appreciate it. So grounding currently lives in that space where curiosity exists. Some interesting findings have emerged, but the scientific community is still asking for more, and that's totally reasonable. But it doesn't mean the conversation isn't worth having, because at the very least, grounding encourages something we already know benefits health. Spending time outdoors, moving our bodies off the couch, out of our work chair, and reconnecting with the natural world. In Genesis, we read that humanity was formed from the dust. It's remarkable that the same earth described in Scripture also interacts with the human body in measurable physical ways. After learning about grounding, reading the research, exploring the book Earthing, and even running my own little multimeter experiment, I found myself thinking about this topic in a slightly different way. No drama, but just more kind of quietly thinking about everything that I do, where the electrical impulses are coming, and what my body is reacting to. Because sometimes when we explore topics just like this, we're tempted to jump to one of two extremes. Either we want to believe it's the answer to everything, or we dismiss it completely. But what I've taken away from grounding is a little bit simpler, but it reminded me how easily modern life has slowly separated us from the environments that our bodies were created to live in. When we spend our days indoors, we wear insulated clothes, shoes, fabrics, our sleeping surfaces have changed, our floor surfaces have changed. None of those things are inherently bad, but they're very different from the world the human body developed in. Grounding in its heart is really just about reconnecting with the earth beneath us. Walk barefoot, touch the soil, feel the grass under your feet. Let your nervous system slow down long enough to notice the world around you again. Just be still. I love the verse, just be still and know that I am God. Maybe grounding turns out to have deeper physiological effects than we currently understand. Or maybe its greatest gift is simply reminding us to step outside more often, to reconnect with nature, to slow down, and to breathe. Sometimes health doesn't come from something complicated. Sometimes it comes from returning to something simple that was always there. And for me, grounding has been less about chasing a crazy health trend and more about remembering to step outside and feel the earth beneath my feet again. Before we finish today, I want to invite you to try a very simple experiment this week. Not a big lifestyle overhaul, and it's totally free. Just a small moment of curiosity for yourself. At some point this week, I want you to step outside on a nice day and take your shoes off. Find a patch of grass or soil or sand, if you're lucky enough to live near a beach, and just stand there for a few minutes. Or if you drink coffee in the morning and it's a pretty morning, just Walk outside in your backyard drinking your coffee. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Notice the temperature of the earth. Notice the texture of the grass. Notice how your body feels after a few minutes of feeling the ground with those highly sensitive feet of yours. If you're someone who enjoys experimenting with things, you could even try the little multimeter experiment that I mentioned earlier, and I think you will be very, very impressed and measure the electrical difference yourself. You don't have to do anything complicated. Sometimes the value is simply the experience. So let's all step outside, breathe the fresh air, and let your nervous system slow down and reconnect with the environment that we were designed to live in on a daily basis, 24 hours a day. Maybe you'll notice something, maybe you won't. But sometimes the smallest habits are the ones that quietly shift how we feel over time when added up. And the only thing that this requires is bare feet and a few minutes outside. So, if something in today's conversation spoke to your heart, consider sharing it with someone who may need that same encouragement. And if this podcast has been a steady voice in your week, leaving a rating or a review is one of the kindest ways that you can help it reach more women. And if you can follow the podcast, even better. I never take lightly the time that you choose to spend here with me. Being a good steward of the minutes that you carve out of your day matters to me, and I am truly grateful that you share them with me. Thank you for being here, for spending part of your day with me, and for taking small, faithful steps towards living well. Keep becoming one small step at a time. Have a great one. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you've enjoyed today's episode, hit that follow button, leave a 5-star review if you're so willing, and help spread the message of Becoming Natural by sharing it with a friend. Check out the resources in the show notes and join the email list to stay on top of all the latest and greatest happenings at Becoming Natural as we roll out exciting new things while we grow. Until next time, take those baby steps to a more natural life and always give yourself grace. Progress, not perfection, is the goal. See you next week.